The fluorescent lights of the accounting firm didn't hum. They vibrated, a low-frequency drone that seemed to sync perfectly with a dull ache in Arthur's lower back. At 45, Arthur was a man of precision, a human calculator who pridefully navigated the labyrinthine tax codes that had governed his world for 2 decades. He sat at a mahogany desk that felt more like an island in a vast, cold ocean of glass and steel. Around him, the office was changing. The heavy leather-bound ledgers he once cherished had been replaced by sleek, ultra-thin monitors that glowed with interfaces he barely recognized. He looked at his hands ink-stained steady, but increasingly idle. He was the anchor of the firm, or so he told himself. But as he watched the younger associates drift past his glass cubicle, their conversations filled with terms like predictive modeling and cloud-based integration, he felt less like an anchor and more like a relic. The story of Arthur isn't just a story about a job. It's a story about the psychological erosion of the self. For years, Arthur believed that his education was a destination he had reached 20 years ago. He had a degree, a CPA license, and a wall of framed certificates that proved he was once an expert. But expertise has a half-life. Like a battery left in a drawer, it slowly leaks its power until all that remains is a shell. Arthur was currently experiencing the silent, terrifying realization that the world was moving at a velocity his mind was no longer calibrated to handle. He was a master of a version of reality that no longer existed. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday during the annual performance reviews. Arthur walked into the conference room, expecting the usual nod of approval from the managing partner, a man he had known for 15 years. Instead, he found a young woman named Sarah sitting at the head of the table. Sarah was 29. She didn't have Arthur's decades of experience, but she had something far more dangerous, a hunger for the unknown. She didn't talk about the past. She talked about the architecture of the future. When she asked Arthur how he planned to integrate the new automated auditing software into his department, the silence that followed was deafening. Arthur's mind went blank. He tried to lean on his experience, talking about the importance of manual verification and the human touch. But Sarah's expression remained neutral, almost pitying. She told him, with a gentleness that felt like a knife, that the firm was moving toward a system where his specific manual skills were no longer the bottleneck, they were the obstacle. That evening, Arthur didn't go home immediately. He sat in his car in the parking garage, the rain drumming against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fingers demanding entry. He felt a profound sense of betrayal. He had played by the rules. He had worked the long hours. He had been loyal. Why was the world suddenly demanding that he become a student again? This is the psychological trap of the expert's ego. When we spend years building a reputation, we become terrified of being a beginner. To learn something new is to admit that what we currently know is insufficient. It is an admission of vulnerability that many people would rather die professionally than make. But as Arthur stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, he saw a man who was becoming invisible. He realized that the experience he touted was actually just 1 year of growth repeated 20 times. He had stopped evolving the moment he felt comfortable. This is the learning gap, the silent chasm that opens up between who we are and who the world needs us to be. If you don't bridge it, the gap eventually swallows you whole. The next day, Arthur did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He walked into a bookstore, not to buy a thriller or a biography, but to find the section on digital transformation. He felt like an interloper. He looked at the covers of the books, bright, bold, filled with jargon that made his head spin. He picked up a book on data analytics and opened the first page. The words felt like sandpaper against his brain. His mind screamed at him to put it back, to go home and watch the news, to find comfort in the familiar. But he remembered Sarah's neutral expression. He remembered the feeling of being a ghost in his own office. He bought the book. The process of relearning is not a graceful one. It is a messy, frustrating, and deeply humbling journey. For the first 2 weeks, Arthur sat at his kitchen table long after his wife had gone to bed, struggling to understand concepts that the 20-somethings at his office seemed to breathe like oxygen. He felt old. He felt slow. There were moments when he wanted to throw the laptop across the room. Psychologically, his brain was fighting the new neural pathways he was trying to forge. It's easier to stay in the ruts of old habits than to carve out new roads. But Arthur had discovered a secret. The pain of learning is temporary, but the pain of irrelevance is permanent. He started small. He didn't try to become a data scientist overnight. He followed a simple rule: 1 hour, 3 nights a week. On Mondays, he studied the software that had terrified him in the meeting. On Wednesdays, he listened to podcasts about the future of finance while he drove to work. On Saturdays, he practiced. He didn't just read, he applied. He downloaded a trial version of the auditing software and began running his old files through it, comparing the automated results to his manual work. He was shocked to find that the machine caught errors he had missed for years. Instead of feeling defeated, for the first time in a decade, he felt a spark of curiosity. This is the shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Arthur was no longer defending his territory. He was exploring a new one. At the office, his demeanor changed. He stopped avoiding Sarah. Instead, he walked into her office one morning and asked a question. Not a defensive question, but a genuine one. He asked her to explain the logic behind a specific algorithm the firm was using. Sarah looked up, surprised, and for the next 30 minutes, the two of them sat hunched over a screen. A 45-year-old veteran and a 29-year-old visionary, speaking the same language. Months passed. The learning gap in Arthur's life began to close. He wasn't the fastest coder, and he wasn't the most tech-savvy person in the room, but he possessed something the younger associates didn't: the ability to marry new technology with 20 years of deep industry intuition. He became the bridge. When the firm faced a complex ethical dilemma regarding a client's automated data, it wasn't Sarah who solved it, and it wasn't the old guard partners. It was Arthur. He understood the nuances of the law that the software couldn't grasp, but he also understood the software well enough to know how to adjust its parameters. Arthur's story isn't just about a promotion or a paycheck. It's about the reclamation of dignity. He realized that the greatest risk in life isn't failure. It's the refusal to grow. The world is a relentless engine of change. It doesn't care about your past achievements or how hard you worked in the 90s. It only cares about your capacity to solve the problems of today. When we stop learning, we start a slow, quiet descent into a professional shadow world where we are tolerated but not valued. The psychological toll of stagnation is often hidden under the guise of stability. We tell ourselves we are stable when we are actually just stuck. We mistake the absence of growth for the presence of security. But true security doesn't come from a job title or a tenure. It comes from the confidence that no matter how the world changes, you have the tools to change with it. Arthur found that his ceiling wasn't determined by his age or his boss. It was determined by his willingness to be a student. Imagine a forest where the tall, ancient trees decide they no longer need to stretch toward the sun because they have already reached a certain height. Eventually, the younger saplings, smaller but hungrier for light, will bypass them, soaking up the resources and leaving the giants in the shade to rot from the inside out. To stay alive in the forest of the modern world, you must never stop reaching. You must accept that the light is always moving, and you must move with it. Arthur eventually became the director of digital integration at his firm. It was a role that didn't even exist when he started his career. He spends his days mentoring both the young tech prodigies and the older managers who are currently where he was a year ago, scared, defensive, and stuck. He tells them the same thing every day. Your degree is the floor, but your curiosity is the ladder. We live in an era where the shelf life of a skill is shrinking every year. What you know today will be the baseline tomorrow and obsolete the day after. This shouldn't be a source of fear, but a source of immense opportunity. It means that you are never finished. It means that at any age, in any industry, you can choose to reinvent yourself. The only thing standing between you and the next version of your life is the discomfort of not knowing. Take a moment to look at your own learning gap. When was the last time you felt like a beginner? When was the last time you felt the frustration of a concept that didn't immediately click? If it's been years, you are in the danger zone. You are resting on a foundation that is slowly eroding beneath your feet. The world is moving. The younger generation is coming, not to take your place, but to fill the vacuum left by those who refuse to evolve. Arthur S. Journey taught him that the most important muscle in the human body isn't the heart or the bicep. It has the brain, has ability to adapt. He no longer fears the fluorescent lights or the sleek monitors. He sees them as tools, not threats. He still has his ink-stained hands and spirit, but they are now typing commands into a future he helped build. He didn't just save his career. He saved his mind. This is the message we want to leave you with today. Do not let your past self become the jailer of your future self. Break the bars of your own expertise. Be humble enough to learn, brave enough to fail, and disciplined enough to keep going when the progress feels slow. The gap is there, waiting for you to cross it. The only question is whether you will build the bridge or wait for the ground to fall away. The stories we tell ourselves define the boundaries of our lives. If you tell yourself you're too old, you are. If you tell yourself you've learned enough, you have. But if you tell yourself that every day is an opportunity to add a new layer to your soul, then the world becomes an endless playground of possibility. Arthur chose the playground. He chose the struggle. And in doing so, he found a version of himself that was more vibrant, more capable, and more alive than the man who first sat at that mahogany desk 20 years ago. You are the architect of your own relevance. Don't wait for a Sarah to walk into your office and tell you that you outdated. Don't wait for the rain to drum on your windshield before you realize you stuck in the mud. Start today. Pick one thing you don't understand and refuse to look away until you do. The learning gap is only as wide as your ego. Shrink the ego, and the gap disappears. The future belongs to the learners, not the knowers. The knowers are beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists, while the learners are the ones who will inherit the earth. Arthur is still learning. He's currently taking a course on ethical AI, sitting at his kitchen table with his laptop, a cup of cold coffee, and a smile on his face. He's no longer a relic. He's a pioneer. If this story resonated with you, if you feel that pull to close your own learning gap and reclaim your future, then you are exactly where you need to be. We explore the deep psychology of growth, success, and the human mind every single week. To join us on this journey and ensure you never stop evolving, make sure to subscribe to Deep Mind. Together, we can turn the fear of the unknown into the fuel for your greatest transformation.